Welcome back to On Texas Football, a little weekend edition. Texas is on the bye week, but that doesn't mean we're not talking football. I'm CJ Vogel. This is Gerry Hamilton. Today we're talking about the freshman class, Texas. Look, 4 weeks in, Gerry, we've seen some contributions from the freshmen on campus right now. Of course, a few of them coming up on that red shirt limit. We will talk about that as well. But altogether, through 4 weeks, Texas in that 3-1. We've seen a number of key contributors on both sides of the football, Gerry. Big picture takeaway through 4 weeks about this class.
Yeah, I think if your expectations are manageable, you'd say this number one class is kind of backing it up early on, because a team that was ranked number one or top five preseason, whatever you want to call it, you're not thinking that a ton of true freshmen are going to play. But you've seen a guy like Grayson Littleton, who was far from the highest ranked guy in this class, be the guy in the snap leader and the guy who started games, and Lance Jackson, guys who have played on a defensive line that is loaded at the edge position. And then you've seen guys in this class, such as a Josiah Sharma, again, not one of the highest ranked guys, but he's going to play more and more as the season moves along. I think Dalen McCutcheon, very similar to Grayson Littleton in that regard, right? So John James Simon, the same thing. So it's an interesting class in that your highest ranked guys maybe haven't even played the most snaps. The depth of this class is showing where the needs are for Texas, and it doesn't mean your five-star guys aren't true five-star guys. It's just they're at positions where it's tougher to get on the field unless there's injury in front of them, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned real quick before we move on, you mentioned the depth of this class, allowing Texas to be versatile in a number of positions. We also just saw the SEC schedule release for a few years from now. I'm looking at that 2027 class specifically, or that 2027 schedule specifically, where this class of freshmen will be juniors. And that's kind of where you see them really make their biggest impact on the starting 22. But you go to Tuscaloosa to face Alabama. You host Michigan, Georgia, Texas A&M, and Auburn at home. And, of course, you'll be on the road once again to go to South Carolina, Arkansas, Vanderbilt. And, of course, you get Oklahoma and Dallas. But, Gerry, for this group of guys to get time this early when it comes to playing in those big games later on in their career, in your words, how important is it for them?
Huge. It's huge. And, by the way, that's their contract year, right? Third year for the guys that want to get out in 3. And that's going to be the toughest schedule I think we see for Texas. And in that 26, 27, 28, 29 release, maybe that 27 that year. So it'll be interesting. I think it's huge for those guys to get on the field now. Just got to get their feet wet, get acclimated to college football. Some guys are going to ascend right past where even the staff thought they would be. And then there's some guys who are going to have to develop over time and kind of wait their time to be a full-time starter at the University of Texas. But I think it's huge. I think this next year and leading into 27, their third year, which there's going to be guys in that class that will be able to go pro after 3 years, I think is going to be huge for this program.
And of those guys going pro after their third years, I think a few of them have already played in the 4 games, all of the 4 games already. There's only 4 freshmen who have seen time in each of the first 4 weeks for the Longhorns. That's wide receiver Dalen McCutcheon, tight end Nick Townsend, Lance Jackson, and Grayson Littleton on the outside there. Lance Jackson, surprisingly there, 15-plus snaps in every single game outside of that Ohio State debut. And, of course, Grayson Littleton already cracking the starting 22 on that defensive side of the ball. Takeaways there, have you been surprised at all by what you've seen from those 4?
I think Lance Jackson, and so many of these kids were in the spring, but still Lance Jackson for me. He came from a smaller school, 4A school, old 3A school, but now 4A with the changes in Texas, 6A, D1, D2, 5A, D1, D2. But he was played both ways. He had never really concentrated on one position. He also played baseball, right? He had all that physical upside, tremendous family, talented family. Dad played basketball at A&M. Obviously, brother Landon Jackson was a second-round pick. But still, Lance Jackson at the edge position with Ethan Burke, with Zena, with Colton Vosick, with Colin Simmons, with Brad Spence, with Trey Moore being a hybrid. I think he's gone past the expectations. But I will say this. You were at the press conference when Colin Simmons said he's a 3-year player. We probably should have listened. Yeah. We probably should have listened to Colin Simmons on that one because it certainly looks like he might be.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the play's backing it up so far. Colin Simmons does lead the team in pressures with 9 through 4 weeks. Right behind him is Lance Jackson with 6. And if
At
that's
6'6", 270.
yes, and that's a guy who could see his position change just as his body develops moving forward. But right now, I would say certainly exceeding expectations early on. And then Grayson Littleton on that same side of the ball. Look, no one has been picked on more than Grayson Littleton. And Jerry, I think he's withstood those early tests. Obviously, we could point to the Jeremiah Smith clips in Ohio State, also some of the one-on-one routes there. But altogether, 24 targets going at Grayson Littleton this year. No other Texas defensive back has more than 15. So,
and the next game will be the biggest in his career because he's playing in his home state against Florida, out of Wiregrass Ranch in the Tampa area. A guy that had a Florida offer, and that Mark Orfe did a good job on way back when he was at Rutgers. But then it was Terry Joseph, obviously, in this staff that signed him. But he was familiar with Orfe going to Texas, and I think there's that familiarity helped too with his transition to college football at Texas. But look, he's going to play at the Swamp in a week from now, and that is going to be the biggest game in his college career to date because of where they're playing and who they're playing. And he is well ahead of schedule. He certainly looks like it. Look, the thing about Grayson is the football IQ he has, and we talked about this with Rod that Texas has felt comfortable enough to give him snaps at corner and nickel 4 games into his true freshman year. Go ahead and name all the true freshman DBs in college football that have done that so far. He may be the only one.
Yeah, that's pretty illustrious list to begin with, and to do it this early. I don't know how many there are, to your point, Jerry. But I want to go to guys who have played or appeared in 3 games, and that list is a little bit longer. There's 6 on the list here: Khalid Lockett, Amari Winston. On the defensive side of the ball, Justice Terry, Josiah Sharman, Jonathan Cunningham, and Cade Phillips. This really ranges from top of that class to the bottom of that class. I think Amari Winston's been a pleasant surprise. I was actually surprised going through the numbers and seeing Jonathan Cunningham as well. But look, back in the offseason, we heard that maybe we would see him on special teams. Evidently, that body allows him right now to be a special teams demon, and that's where he's seeing a lot of his time. But give me your thoughts real quick on Josiah Sharma and Justice Terry, 2 of the more higher rated guys on that defensive side of the ball, appearing in 3 games so far.
Yeah, Justice Terry, obviously, he's a guy who he has the toughest task of any true freshman this year to me because he is literally cross-training as a 5 technique edge while sitting in on the defensive line, interior defensive line meeting rooms and training at both in practice. That's a lot to put on his plate. He's held his weight pretty well. I think he's around 275, 277 right now, which is good. You kind of wondered, is he going to get back in the low 260s? And when is he going to get up to 290-ish pounds? But he's just going to continue to get better. And when you think about that versatility that he has, and you think about what Lance Jackson's shown, that is pretty powerful. Smith Orogbo, by the way, has played too. Then Myron Charles. But talking about Josiah Sharma, all these freshman defensive linemen, I feel like Texas thinks all of them are going to be hits for them. And there's not a bust in the group. But Josiah Sharma, he just has size that nobody else on this roster has on the defensive front. That's the thing about Sharma. Yeah, Cole Brevard he's a fire hydrant, right? He's a brick. But Josiah Sharma is 6'4.5", 360-ish. There just aren't many guys like that are athletic enough to play at a high level. And Josiah Sharma is certainly one of those guys. And he gave me Sean Rogers vibes and coming out, and I know he's a bigger guy than Rogers was, but just how quick and athletic he is at that size and what Sean Rogers became size-wise, I think Sharma's got a chance to be a difference maker for Texas in the next 2 or 3 years. Not this year, the following 2 or 3 years.
And again, that's key, continuing that strong defensive line performance that we've seen in each of the last 3 years. Jerry, one quick note, I did want to add Khalid Lockett, the most snaps of any Texas wide receiver outside of Dalen McCutcheon. Yeah. But look, I think that's the pecking order right now. They target him very quickly and against UTEP as well. He got a reception once more against Sam Houston State. There you see a guy trying to earn his stripes through game time as well. Anything there?
Yeah. I mean, look, Khalid Lockett, he's going to look totally different physically in year 2 than year 1. And he's already added about 12, 14 pounds of lower body muscle. Next will be just filling out that long limb frame up top, which will take a little longer. But he has the ability to climb the ladder and go snatch the football out of the air. And I'm not sure how much of that we're going to see this year. You kind of hope you don't see a lot of it because if you do, that means Ryan Wingo's probably injured. So you hope you only see him a little bit this year for the sake of the team. But his future is very bright. And I wanted to add this, what the position that's come through so far in this freshman class that I think's affected recruiting in 2026 class is Emory Winston and Nick Townsend at tight end, both being hits for this staff. If there was any hesitation on either one of those guys, you would see Texas being more active going after a 2026 tight end. But the fact that they're okay if they don't get one right now tells you how much they like Emory Winston and Nick Townsend. And by the way, their play on the field's backed it up. I don't think there's any doubt. Both of those guys could be starters at Texas. One of them probably will be. But I think in future years, you're going to see both those guys on the field together a lot.
Yeah, and I think your point proves itself, given that Texas was after a number of highly rated tight ends earlier in this cycle as well. But to your point, Texas trotting out 5 guys, 2 in this freshman class. Tight end looks very healthy moving forward. Next group of guys we're talking about, they've played in 2 of the 4 games. They still have 2 games remaining in their red shirt. We'll see. I don't think any of the guys on this list necessarily will be redshirting, but 2 of this freshman class that have appeared in 2 games. That's James Simon, who I'm sure Texas will see plenty of moving forward. Jamie French, Smith Orogbo, Myron Charles, and Bo Barnes. Jerry, to me, all 5 of these guys are going to be on the field for more than 4 games in 2025.
Yeah, I think so too. Jamie French is the one you kind of wondered about, but I do think, look, the wide receiver room, there's going to be some nagging injuries. It's a long season, and the SEC play hasn't even begun yet. We're a week away. There's going to be some nagging injuries. All 3 of those receivers are going to be needed at some point, those freshman receivers, in my estimation. But, in those guys you talked about there, Smith Orogbo is probably the surprise to me. We'll get to Bo Barnes, but Orogbo missed his entire senior year, save a game and a half with knee surgery. And when he got to Austin in the spring, really wasn't available. So it tells you how talented he really is, that he hasn't had the same time with Torrey Becton. He's been in more of a rehab stage for a long time at Texas than he was a physical building out the frame stage like most guys are. The fact that he's already getting on the field, I kind of had him penciled in for a red shirt, CJ. And
I did too.
And he's shown pass rush ability. So that Xena-like frame, he's not going to be as big, but similar in terms of the length of the arms. But that first and second step and ability to bend has already shown up on 3 or 4 snaps at Texas. That's saying something. Texas loves Myron Charles, the freshman out of Port Charlotte, defensive lineman. And Texas loves Bo Barnes. It's just, Bo Barnes is in one of those positions where you just have to have a little patience this year.
Yeah.
I mean, Anthony Hill, Leonga Lafau, you just Trey Moore. You just look around and you say, everywhere I look that I try to get on the field, there's a very experienced player in front of me. And Barnes does have that patience. But just because you don't see a lot of Bo Barnes doesn't mean the Texas staff isn't high on Bo Barnes, because they are.
Of course. Again, I expect each of those 5 to be on the field more moving forward. James Simon might end up being one of your most important.
He can end up being the 3rd running back this year.
Yeah.
Which means there's times he could be the 2nd running back.
He has certainly shined in his 2 games of appearance so far for the Longhorns, Jerry. Again, we're moving down the list here. These guys have all appeared in 1 game so far this year. I think there are some surprising names considering where these guys were ranked coming in. Obviously, some of the offseason reports that we had and what we were hearing behind the scenes. But 1 game into their Texas careers through 4 weeks, that's KJ Lacey, Michael Terry III, Nick Brooks, the Colemans, Zealous Hicks, Jonah Williams, and Caleb Chester. First off the bat, look, you got 3 guys that maybe I'm a little surprised about. That's Nick Brooks, based off of what we heard in the offseason, Jonah Williams, the 5-star dual sport athlete, and Michael Terry, who has yet to really carve out a role for himself in that wide receiver room. We'll see how that changes as well moving forward.
Yeah, I think the main thing with Brooks and Jonah Williams is it's 2 different circumstances that have kept them off the field. Had Nick Brooks not had his run-in post-spring, I think he definitely would have played in more than 1 game, and it's peculiar why he didn't play in the first 3, right? But I think we pretty much have a good discussion point on that. But Nick Brooks is one of the real talents in this class. Jonah Williams, one of the real talents in this class, a lingering hamstring issue that maybe he tried to come back too soon and it set him back. He got on the field for the first time, both those guys in the last game there before this bye week. And what you saw from Jonah Williams is a 6'3", 215-pound guy that can run, that's going to close gaps. He's going to eat up turf. He's going to eat up angles. And I do think he still has – you saw him on special teams. I still would love to get him involved in the return game this season as well. With Nick Brooks, look, he's a play away at right tackle. he could easily end up being a play away at left tackle this year too. We'll have to see on that. But Nick Brooks is a mover of people. He's got an extremely bright future, and he's one of those guys that, despite only playing in one game this year, he's probably a 3-year guy for Texas with his talent level if he does it right.
I'm with you. That leaves just 3 waiting for their first career snaps, Jerry. That's running back Ricky Stewart, Devin Coleman, and Jackson Christian. 2 on the offensive line. I don't think that's too big of a surprise. In fact, I would think Texas would, sit here and certainly want their true freshman offensive linemen to kind of stew, to develop on the back end, and not be thrust into a spot of needing them on the field very early in their career. No surprises in that regard right now. I think this is actually the group that you could probably circle and say redshirt is most likely as well. So, Jerry, I'll leave this, one of the final questions with you. Of every freshman that we just went through right there and their situations, I know we're all a little bit different. Which one do you hope to see a little bit more of as Texas enters SEC play?
Man, you hope it's Jonah Williams, because I think he can really expand the special teams for Texas, whether that's in the return game, whether that's in a punt block game, whether that's just as a special teams playmaker in general. I think he is one for me. I'll say this. In the SEC, that's a very physical league. We know we're going to see a lot of Grayson Littleton. We know Lance Jackson's going to play. We know Dalen McCutcheon will play. I'm kind of leaning on Nick Townsend a little bit because I think he's so physical in the run game, and Texas has yet to even get him involved in the passing game. And I'm here to tell you, my prediction is there's no way a guy that's 6'3", 240 that runs in the low 4.5s that Sark's not going to throw the ball to this year. He's he's probably waiting. He's probably going to try to spring him on one of these opponents coming up here. Nick Townsend will not just be an H-back pseudo tight end blocker and goal line blocker. He is going to be involved, and it's just win. He's too good of an athlete. He's the guy. What about you, CJ? Who's the guy for you?
I was going to go the route of Nick Townsend for that exact reason, right? We've talked about it a little bit with tight ends. Only 10 targets to Jack injuries. Nick Townsend only 2 to him. You've seen a lot of Texas tight ends on the field this year. When do they really start to open it up and see the same production of a Gunnar Helm or a Jatavian Sanders over the last 3 years? I'm waiting, and I do think that's the wrinkle that we'll see a little bit more of in SEC play. On top of that, look, anytime you see Nick Townsend coming across the backside of the offensive line for a kick-out block, sign me up because he is fantastic at it. But I have to go with James Simon as well. He deserves some mention in this, and I do think – for early and young running backs, very early in their career, they only improve as they get more touches, as they get more up to speed with the speed of the game, as they understand the blocking schemes in front of them. What we've seen early on in James Simon's rushing career at Texas, a lot to be excited about from the long term for him.
I've said on Coffee and Football, and I think people are a little taken aback, I think he's the most naturally gifted runner in the room at Texas. I think he's just got the best instincts for the position. Now, that's C.J. Baxter after a major knee injury. So to be clear on that, if C.J. Baxter never had that major knee injury, he'd be ahead of James Simon. As a running back, but I still say this. I'm not sure James Simon instinctively is not the best of all those guys. He has the vision. Those cuts are so decisive. His peripheral's so good. And he's got a frame. Like I asked the chat a question one day, CJ. Could he become Katron Allen in years 2 and 3 for Penn State? They have very similar running styles, and they have very similar frames. Katron Allen at Penn State's 5'11", 217, 220. I think that's probably where we're going to see James Simon. So if he can become Katron Allen, Texas has a hell of a running back. Not just this year, but I think really is in year 2 and year 3. I'll tell you my final piece on this, CJ, is feels like Texas is trying to get Cade Phillips ready to play a little bit more.
I agree.
I know Kobe Black was injured last game, but he still played 55 snaps. I think Texas is looking to get Cade Phillips in a position where they can put him on the field more against some bigger, longer limb receivers in the SEC play.
Yeah, just going off that so far, we've seen him in 3 consecutive weeks, starting with San Jose State, UTEP, and then Sam Houston. His snaps, Jerry, have gone from 3 to 17 to 31. You tell me where that trend's headed next. Of course, Texas will get some cornerbacks returning from injury, but the ramp up process is there. But that will do it for today. Of course, we will break down everything from the bye week, which will be the first bye week of this freshman class's career here at Texas as well, worth a little bit of celebration for the first 4 weeks of their career. But everything else will be covered over at ontexasfootball.com. If you're not an OTF OG, there is no better time than right now to join the community. $39.95 gets you 1 year of access. For Jerry, for Rod, for Bobby, myself, and Jeff Howe, it's a great time to be a Longhorn again. And with this freshman class, Jerry, the future is very bright. So yes. Enjoy this weekend.
We didn't even talk about KJ Lacey. That's how bright the future is.
That's right. We didn't, but we all know where things are headed with him as well. But for Jerry, thank you very much for the time. And for us over at On Texas Football and producer Matthew behind the scenes, y'all have a good one. Welcome.